DX plus HX equals growth. This was an equation I shared when writing Banking on Digital Growth, where a positive digital experience, when combined with a positive human experience, provides a path towards maximizing future growth at your financial brand. The question is, out of these two elements, the digital experience, the human experience, which one should a community financial brand focus on, especially in a commoditized world where everyone is promoting the same great rates, same amazing service, the same laundry list of lookalike product features, not to mention now the same commoditized digital experiences thanks to commoditized lookalike digital banking apps? We'll get answers to these questions and more on today's episode of the Banking on Digital Growth podcast.
You're listening to the Banking on Digital Growth podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Banking on Digital Growth podcast. I'm James Robert Lay, founder and CEO of the Digital Growth Institute, where we're on a mission to help financial brands stop losing loans and deposits. And we do that by guiding them through the Banking on Digital Growth program. Today's episode is part of the Digital Growth Journey series. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I wanted to let you know that I recently published my new book, Banking on Change. I wrote this book as a guide for leaders so that leaders can guide themselves as well as guide their teams through all of the exponential changes that we are experiencing and will continue to experience in the age of AI. You can grab a copy of the book for yourself along with your team to read together. Plus, get bonus resources when you visit www.bankingonchange.com. Now, joining me for today's conversation as part of our Digital Growth Journey series is Josh Cook. Josh is the president and CEO of Community Choice Credit Union. Today, Josh and I are going to explore some of the biggest growth opportunities that you can create or capture at your financial brand through a focus on human experience. Because once again, when we take a positive human experience and combine that with a positive digital experience, that provides a path towards future growth. Welcome to the show, Josh. It is so good to share time with you today, buddy.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Before we get too far into our conversation about just your journey of growth and how you're perceiving the future when it comes to credit unions, leaderships, financial brands, community financial brands for that matter, what is good in your world right now, personally, professionally? Your pick to start on a positive note.
Oh my gosh, good and work. You know what? Things are really good. We've been very fortunate from a credit union standpoint, not to dive into financials, but if you pull them up, our financials have been really strong. We've been kind of counter to the market. So in fact, I was just pulling that up with our board yesterday, as rates have continued to stay high. Our net interest margin is actually, I think the average for credit unions is 3%, and right now we're at 4%. So delinquency low, net interest margins up. Rates are looking good, adding new branches, trying to do more crazy stuff. So that part's been fun from a business standpoint. Personally, I don't know. I'm ready for the weather to turn, get out on the lake and do some boating. Other than that, nothing too exciting.
Well, getting out on the lake, and I mean, that sounds like a fun afternoon or a fun weekend right there. And then you've got all the growth at the credit union. If we go back in time, I think it's important for context for those who are watching or listening to how did Josh get to where he's at today, and more importantly, where is Josh going forward into the future? Can you roll the clock back just ever so slightly before you got into the credit union space, because you were doing things completely differently back then? You were on a different path.
You mean as far as before credit unions?
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, I don't know. Wandering the earth in some respects, I guess. No, I had no idea what I was going to do. I thought I shouldn't say that. I thought I was going to go work for my parents, which I did. After I graduated college, they had a fishing camp in Northwest Ontario. So it's like you'd imagine, fueling boats, cleaning fish, taking people fishing, cutting down trees. And it didn't take long to realize that I absolutely hated working for my parents, except for I realized I did own everything at the camp. I owned absolutely everything because my dad every hour would say, "Hey, go grab your chainsaw. Hey, go grab your tractor. Hey, go grab your whatever." So I forgot to take it all with me. But once I decided I hated work for my parents, I was like, I should probably get a real job, and came back to Iowa, which is where I'm from, and got a job working at the ABC affiliate here, selling airtime, coming up with commercials. And it took me about 3 months on that job to realize, well, this is not for me. If this is the rest of my life, oh my God.
Yeah.
So about a year and a half or almost two into that job, a teammate of mine comes walking in, another sales guy, and says, "Hey, there's a job at a credit union, a marketing job." And I said, "Which credit union?" He said, "Community Choice." I said, "Who the hell is Community Choice?" And called him up, got an interview, took the job. They literally trained me for 3 days, which training was, I didn't really learn a ton, but they took me through teller training for about a day and a half. And by the time I think I hit Wednesday afternoon or Thursday, they gave me my office and said, "All right, go." And that was it. And I'm still here.
And you're
So,
still there. I mean, if you
like I
think,
told you, either lazy or loyal. I don't know which one. They both start with L, look the same on the surface.
if you think back to that experience, because you've been at the credit union now for 22 years,
Yeah.
and there's a lot that has changed over the last 22 years. In fact, I was sharing with you, I was just starting my business back in 2002, and if you go back over the last 22 years, what have you seen change? Just at
Oh
a
my gosh. I mean, you know what? Some things have really changed drastically and other things have remained the same,
Sure.
right? They really have. So when I started here, it just blew my mind. Again, I didn't have a lot of formal training because it was a smaller organization at the time and they really hadn't advanced that. I don't even remember. I'd have to go back and look. I think maybe we were 125 million, three locations. And it blew my mind because, from a marketing lens, I kept trying to understand why would somebody come to Community Choice Credit Union? Like I didn't know how to wrap my head around how we're going to market this thing, how we're going to grow it, how are we going to get people interested, and there was no good answer. And you still hear some of these answers. So I would hear stuff like, "Well, we have a volunteer board, so we don't pay our board, so they represent the interests of the members." I'm like, how is that a benefit to the members that the board is volunteer? This makes no sense. And then I hear, "Well, we're a not-for-profit financial cooperative." Okay, great. That's the structure. What does that mean? What's the competitive advantage? Well, we offer lower rates and fees than the banks do. I'm like, is that true? Have you actually done a comparison on rates and fees? Are they actually lower, or are we just going to say it and hope they are? Plus, I kept thinking in my mind, I'm like, if we want to be Walmart, that's great, but lowest rates and fees or the best of those leads you right to the bottom, right? So I systematically had a couple lunches with people that had been here a long time who I thought understood the difference and why somebody would come to Community Choice. And I'm not even kidding you. I was left with the responses multiple times of why wouldn't they come to Community Choice? So that was my direction when I started here. I thought I'm here for 2 years. I'm swimming in a sea of tan and taupe, nothing more boring than a financial institution. And what I'm left with is I'm going to go out and tell people the reason they should come to Community Choice is why wouldn't you come to Community Choice? So we've obviously changed a great deal, at least here from that perspective, to try to create a different, unique selling proposition. But some credit unions are still that way.
Yeah.
So I think broadly, credit unions have advanced a lot. Clearly, technology, services, competition. Uh, but as far as some of them, they're still stuck in those ways.
And let's dig into that. It's not just credit unions. I would say it's also community banks too. We'll just call them community financial institutions.
Absolutely.
To the fact that whenever I wrote Banking on Digital Growth, my first book, I diagnosed this as narcissistic marketing. Like it's why should I join? And we're still asking this questions. We just wrapped up a digital growth blueprint for another organization, and one of the questions: senior leadership team, marketing, sales, kind of throughout the organization. Why should I open an account at your financial brand? And they answer. And the response is we have great rates, we have amazing service, we have lookalike product features. Okay, the follow-up is okay, now how are you different than anyone else based upon what you just shared? And that's where you start to see the disconnect. Why is that from your perspective? Because you had that narrative, but you're working to reframe that narrative at your organization.
Why is there a disconnect, you think, with people?
Yeah, like why is there a perception that we believe that you should open an account at our institution because of these reasons that everyone else is saying? Why do we all say the same thing? And why? Because belief drives behavior.
Yeah, I don't know. I like the idea of it's a little bit of narcissism, maybe, or there's this. And you think about credits how they've started, right? The idea of a movement. You
Yeah.
always hear movement,
Mm-hmm.
which drives me crazy. And I think there's this idea of it's almost cult-like at some level that why wouldn't somebody want to be a part of us? And they're not actually thinking about the consumer in mind,
Correct.
right? They're just not journeying from their lens. I think there's a bunch of that though. I don't think people recognize even things that go on in a financial institution. I'm see if I can tie this back together. One thing that always blew my mind was people that come to work at a credit union or a community bank, or probably any bank, they all of a sudden decide that they are now a homo economicus, right?
Mm.
That everybody should make the perfect fiduciary decision, even though they're not
Yeah.
themselves. But there's that aura of intimidation that exists in these financial institutions. When somebody comes in, it's actually intimidating, right? Even if they have money and everything else, because they feel like they're being looked at, that they should make perfect decisions. Nobody's generally taking the time to ask what they really want to do,
Sure.
right? Do they not want to make a payment for 3 months because they're going to take their family to Disney? It's something they've always wanted to do. Well, that's not the perfect fiduciary decision, right? But it might be the right decision in their life. You can go to a teller line anywhere and hear the most amazing conversations, which is, I'm going to tie this back to your question. The most amazing conversations where somebody will come in and they, give their account number, their name, look them up, and they want to pull money out. It's a Friday. Hey, I'm looking to take $1,000 out of my savings account today. Great. It's their money. They've been verified. Give them $1,000. And you'll hear them add a little line a lot of times like, yeah, we're heading out of town this weekend, so just need a little extra cash. They're justifying, and people don't realize it, they're justifying their actions, which are totally valid and totally fine, because they feel like they're being looked at, that they should be making a different financial decision. And bring that back is how I tie that back to your question is they're just not aware.
Yeah.
The financial institutions, credit unions aren't aware. I mean, they can tell you that they have commodity products like everybody else, but they're not aware of that they are the same, that the products are the damn same, that their experience is the damn same, that their service is the same, and that their service, to be honest with you, nobody cares until it's terrible. Or if your product's good enough, your service can be terrible and people will still come back. You ever go to McDonald's, do the drive up?
I can't tell you that I have. I haven't been to McDonald's in a
Never?
long.
Well, you've
As
been
a
through a
kid,
drive up.
of course.
Okay.
Yes,
And do you expect that your order is going to be screwed up from time to time?
absolutely.
Most of the time. Some people look in the bag, they check it beforehand, or what happens is, if you're like me, you leave and you're like, damn it, they screwed up. And I just go on about my day, and then eventually find myself right back in the same poor service. So they're just not aware, and they have no idea of figuring out what a competitive advantage for them is.
I want to go back to where you started to take your thought process, because it's something that I've been thinking about a lot. This idea of the emotive side of money. And perhaps there's a lack of an emotional intelligence here, but also it's like there's the perception of, oh, we're working with a financial institution, therefore I have to act in a certain way. But if we look at the research at the macro level, 70 to 85% of Americans are struggling with financial stress or financial anxiety. There's the whole idea of living paycheck to paycheck, and that is independent of what the paycheck is. I actually was just having a conversation with Shannon McClay, who is the founder of the Financial Gym. They're doing amazing work over there around helping people reframe their relationship with money. And one of the things she said, listen, she goes, I have seen people with 7-figure incomes living paycheck to paycheck. And so if we take that into account, could there be an imposter syndrome within some organizations that it's like I work at a credit union, or I work at a community bank, but I'm still struggling with the stuff, trying to figure the stuff out myself. And that creates this little bit of an internal anxiety, because I think about, if you're going to have a positive, you're talking about service, if you're going to have a positive member experience or customer experience, you got to have first and foremost a positive employee experience. What's your take?
Absolutely. Going back to your comment on the people, that are financially stressed, or what they're trying to do, or even on the employee experience, I think a lot of times the starting point is wrong, and the frame is wrong on how people are trying to solve people's issues or challenges, or what they have when it comes to the financial space. Let me tell you a Jason story. So we did a deal when Dave Ramsey came into town, right? So obviously people know Dave Ramsey, the envelope system, put the money away, pay off your debts, debt snowball, get everything paid off and you're debt free. And I think he's wrong a little bit, right? And so we were actually having dinner with Dave before his show he was putting on, and my comment to him was, sitting next to him, I said, Dave, you're an anarchist, right? And I think he even wrote it in his book to me that, thanks for calling me an anarchist. I said, you're an anarchist. And he goes, tell me how. I said, okay, I get your idea, I get your methodology. You're going to get people out of debt. That's great. I said, so now for you, if the goal is to get everybody in the US, let's say, out of debt through this method, and everybody's out of debt, what that means is the entire economy collapses since it's built on credit, right? The entire economy collapses. You end up at the point where neighbors are shooting each other over the vegetables they have in their garden, and people are protecting themselves, and the world's on fire. I said, that's the definition of anarchy. Definition of anarchy. He goes, the good news is most people won't follow it, right? They won't follow the strategy. The challenge is, unless you're having conversations with people and trying to understand what they want to do in their life or what brings them happiness or joy or satisfaction, you can't actually figure out how to provide them with the right debt instruments or the right knowledge, even from a financial standpoint, for them to live their life. I would tell you for many years leading up to this point in my life that I was a heavy utilization of debt, and I lived because I could manage my cash flows. Now, nobody explained cash flows to me and the importance of cash flows or debt service, debt coverage service ratios. Nobody explained that. But it became obvious to me that I was at an apex in life of there's things I wanted to experience at a
Mm.
certain age, at a certain health, whatever that I could do. And I knew I was going to have to utilize credit to do so.
Yeah.
But that's generally not the starting point of the conversation. It's not generally like, hey, what is it you're trying to do in your life? What are things that you're looking to do, or what do you want to do going forward? And then you got to draw that out because other people are just going to talk about, I don't want to have to pay a mortgage ever again, or I don't, I want to pay cash my car. I don't want to have debt. There's a healthy debt depending on what you want to do in life. Like I would argue if somebody said, I want to we refinance people car loans all the time to higher interest rates, and they'll love us for it. You're like, well, why would they do that? Well, there's a few things. Even financially, if we're extending the term or the duration and it's a higher rate, but they're going to trade in the car earlier, it's not going to really have a major effect on interest, right? But freeing up that cash flow may have a major impact on whatever it is they're trying to do in life.
Yeah.
And last I checked, money's pretty common. They print more every day. The one thing that's not common or infinite is time.
Yes.
So how do you blend experiences and what you're trying to do in life with the idea of access to money?
So that's a very interesting perspective. And what you're framing it around is the uniqueness of the individual. And one of the questions that I ask in banking on change, because change is about human transformation, it's how do you want to grow? And grow is an acronym for what are your goals? What are the roadblocks that stand in the way of those goals? And then what are the opportunities to transform those roadblocks to move forward towards stated goals? And perhaps maybe the starting point, if I'm thinking about community institutions, is to understand or begin to learn how to just facilitate that dialogue, that discussion of what's important to the individual, and then provide them with a path forward that they can begin to make progress to, because now it's experiential. And we know the idea of experience because an experience will take a much deeper seed into the brand efficacy, whoever's helping them achieve that stated goal for that individual. What's your take on that?
I could agree more. And I think at first, most financial institutions, credit unions, banks, whatever, it doesn't matter. First, they have to get more human in their approach. Their approach has to be more human. It can't be this command and control vibe, right? Through how the facility is designed, how the experience is. I think
Mm-hmm.
even colors play a role in that.
Yeah.
How you approach people on products and be authentic about it. I mean, I always love the adage that if you talk to people the way most advertising does, they punch you in the throat,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's like there's also a miss sometimes on this human component on how people are being approached in financial institutions. And I think credit unions get lazy because of their structure. Hey, we're a not-for-profit financial cooperative. We're here to serve our members. Great. What's that mean? Just because you say you're this thing doesn't mean you're approaching people in that spirit, if you know what I mean. But yeah,
Correct.
I think you do have to dive deeper and have these conversations, and it can't just be about a debt or savings. It has to be about what type of experiences are they looking to gain in their life, short
Yes.
term, long term, near term.
This idea of the internal perception or the internal belief, particularly when it comes to credit unions, because you've got this history of cooperative movement, membership. We just did a website secret shopping study for a credit union, and they were interested in learning objectively to the marketplace how important membership was. And I already kind of knew what the answer was going to be, but then you want to quantify that and qualify that with the objective perspective of others who don't have a relationship with the organization or even the industry for that matter. And about 85% of people that went through this particular credit union's website, and it was framed around opening a new checking account, but we tied membership perspective into that. A, there wasn't a big awareness into what membership was. B, there was actually negative connotation of membership because they thought that they were going to have to pay membership dues. And then C, once we took them to the membership page that defined what membership was, there was even more confusion because it wasn't even clearly defined. And I said, listen, all these people want at the end of the day is just a checking account.
Right.
It's not even that. A checking account, I think, is a bad framing. It's a spending account because it's coming back to your
Right.
perspective. This is goals. You mentioned advertising, feeling like you're going to get punched in the throat. I want to segue here slightly because I think what you're doing is very unique. It's very interesting. The credit union in 2012, which is another interesting date because that was the year that I blew up my digital agency. And we went down this path that we've been taking here with the Digital Growth Institute. You founded Choice Creative Solutions. How is that tied to the credit union here?
Yeah. Great question. So there's a story, shockingly. So the story goes like this, and I could tell you quickly from the story and then what it escalated to and why I think it's a benefit for us now and has been a benefit. So um, what happened was is I realized our budget was pretty small, right? When you look back, now the budget's more robust. I think when you compare us in terms of marketing spend across other financial institutions, which this would blow a lot of credit unions away. If we explain how much money we spend on marketing a year compared to our asset size, they're like, oh, we could never do that. I'm like, well, no, you can't do it because your strategy is totally different. But if you go back in time to 2012, prior to that, what had happened is I'd recognize like, hey, we got a limited budget and our awareness is not anywhere it needs to be for us to actually gain membership products and everything else, right? I think of it as like the Nike effect.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you have a financial institution that's offering a low rate on a loan product, let's say low rate on a vehicle loan, make it easy. A low rate, if somebody doesn't know who you are, your likelihood of success is still quite low, right? It's like offering a $29.95 sneakers when you go to the store and you've never heard of the brand. You're going to think that the sneaker's cheap,
Mm-hmm.
right? If it has a Nike swoosh on it and it's $29.99, $29.95, you're going to think it's a good deal,
Yep.
right? So that's kind of the Nike effect for me. So for me, I'm like, well, we don't have a big budget. I can't actually argue for a bigger one. What are we going to do? So, of course, digital is getting bigger and bigger, data collection's bigger. And so I'm like, wait, we can website some promotions, right? And if we can gain access to things that people really want, like tickets, concerts, events, experiences, we can gain access to these things. I think we can create this website and we can steer people to it through the little bit of advertising money we do have. And we can bring in a few other sponsors with us
Mm.
and spend their money on even more advertising to draw people to the site. We give some crap away. We collect data that they're interested in, whatever the products are, and whoever the sponsors might have information on. And now we can take that data, retarget and remarket them. So that started, we were doing that internally, which was kind of a challenge, right? Because now you got this credit union you really don't know, or you know a little bit of, and I'm going to major car dealers or some other business and trying to get them to sponsor. And they're like, why would a credit union come in here and pitch us some marketing stuff? So that was a problem. B, the next thing that happened would have been around that time frame or right around there was a big new arena was opening up in our town. So a big concert venue arena, Wells Fargo Arena opened up. And I took a meeting, which was shocking, with a guy that was selling for them. And I took it because I'm like, we're not going to be in the arena, whatever, that doesn't make any sense. I can't imagine how much money that's going to cost. And he came in and he sat down and he goes, what you should do is you guys should do a founder's suite, one of the luxury boxes, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
food and beverage, VIP, everything, all this stuff. And I basically kind of shoot him out of the office. I'm like, you're crazy, you're out of your mind. And I actually said the stuff people had told me, which was funny. I said, you don't understand.
Yeah.
We're a not-for-profit financial cooperative. Volunteer board would never go for this, and the money being all spent here, how can we make it work? So I sat on it for a whole night. That was about it. And the whole night, and then I'm like, you know what? Hang on. I have an idea. And I came back to our CEO. I go, I think we should get a suite at Wells Fargo Arena. And I tell him the price and everything else. He's like, you're out of your mind. I go, look, no, I've reconfigured the budget. I think we can afford it. Here's how. I'm going to get other people's money for my shortfall on the advertising side. So what we did was, I believe that 95+% of the people in the area is never going to go watch a concert, Taylor Swift, whatever, up in a VIP suite. But I believed a lot of them would love to win it. And
Yes.
I also knew Taylor Swift, Pink, whoever is way more exciting to see than Community Choice Credit Union or whatever Ford dealership. So we started using those concerts to create attention for us, data collect, get other sponsors, use their money, and at the same time started this marketing company. So that way, when we were going out talking about it, we weren't a credit union, we were a marketing company, just happens to be owned by the credit union. So fast forward, which may get longer, fast forward, we had success with that. We were able to pull in more sponsors, advertisers like, hey, there's actually legs under this thing beyond what we're right now doing. And so it would do traditional things, web design, graphic layout, buying media. And then as the credit union grew, and as we were spending more money in the marketplace on advertising, there was another pivotal moment, which was, wait a minute, hang on. What if we upend how people are buying media, at least for us in this town? So, normally if it's an agency, they go place it on behalf of the client, and they keep their agency commission.
Yep.
I said, what if we have a couple friends now in radio and some of the TV areas. And we went to the largest radio station group in this area. They had the largest QM listeners, and went in and said, hey, how many weather spots do you have? And they said, we have 28,500 roughly across all of our stations for the year. Okay, we'd like to buy all of them. So now you go into this radio group and say the price is normally here. So let's say drive times, whatever, it's normally $15 for 15 seconds, which we only need 42 words anyway to explain our message. So let's say it's $15, but because now we're coming in to buy them all with economy of scale, let's say the marketing company gets them down below $4 or four and a quarter, whatever, which is what we were able to do. Now, how does the marketing company pay for it? Well, Community Choice is spending more money on advertising. Now we're buying stuff at less than a third. Well, hell, we'll buy all half. And now they have capital to live for a while they try to sell the remaining inventory. And so then we started brokering inventory. And then we built a software, and then who knows what crazy thing next. Actually, really go crazy. We chartered one of the best things we did for the credit union and for Choice Creative in the last 2 or 3 years was we chartered a 737 and flew it to Vegas for a college football game. How about that?
Wow. So this is the entrepreneurial growth mindset that really gets me excited and energized about like what the future possibilities are. Your story is actually resonating with me because there's a guy out of Houston, Texas. His name was Mattress Mac. You might have,
Yeah.
okay, so Mattress Mac because he goes
Yeah.
and now he gambles on all the big games and whatnot. But I mean, Mattress Mac, I mean, he was a genius back in the day because he would go and he'd buy all of the late night spots for literally
Yep.
pennies on the dollar and would just build his brand. And now, I mean, what he has done for himself, his family, the Houston area, he has his philanthropic adventures. I mean, it just really, it's the same type of, you're just seeing things differently than what others saw before, which is something that I write about in Banking on Change. But I want to I want to come back to something that you said. You had the awareness that when this person came in and was trying to get you to buy the suite, oh, we can't do this. We can't. No, we're not for profit. Like you slept on it a night, but you thought differently. What was the shift in your thinking there?
I don't remember who coined this. I don't know if it was a Disney thing or what. There's a way of thinking, right? Which is instead of saying no, it's a yes and, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there was kind of this moment where it was just like, wait, what if we say yes? And then what would we do with it? Or then what would I have to do on the back end from a budgeting standpoint? But the shift for me was just this idea, like if we're out peddling products and we're peddling the same damn commodities as everybody else, and that's how we're going to get them, which we do peddle products, right? I would say that we are a retail sales organization.
Yep.
How we're structured as a credit union, we're a retail sales organization.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that's the blue ocean strategy, right? That's a red ocean if there ever was.
Yeah.
And you're just stuck in it. So it's like, how do you peddle experience, or in this case, how do we gain data and then be able to use the data to talk about products in conjunction with something that's way cooler than what we have,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is another problem for community banks and credit unions is weirdly there's this ego and they need to shelve it a bit, right? And recognize that they're not as cool as they think they are. and that the products aren't as glorious as you think they are because everybody else has them.
Correct. Read Ryan Holiday's Ego is the Enemy if you want to put your ego in check. And that's something I've been doing for the last 14 years of my life since that 2012 experience of restructuring our organization, because there was a lot of ego back then. And it was like, sometimes you have to die to yourself to then be able to go back and reinvent, resurrect, Phoenix rise from the ashes, whatever that narrative structure is, voyage and return. I mean, you can say them all these different ways. Where are you going next? What are you most hopeful as we start to wrap up and look ahead towards the future? Because you're just seeing things, you're thinking differently, you're feeling differently, and as a result, you're acting differently. What are you hopeful about as you look ahead towards the future?
I don't know. We've done a lot of crazy things here, I believe, and but it's, there's bigger shops, more profitable, smaller, whatever. And I don't really care about growth for growth,
Mhm.
right? I mean, I get the economy and sales side, but you can have a $200 million financial institution be the best $200 million financial institution. You can have a $20 billion one be the best 20 and everything in between. Um, for me, and when I say we've done some crazy stuff, you would appreciate it from when you were talking about web coding that you were doing and building those pages. Maybe some other time we'll talk about it offline. Another crazy moment was I actually knew a guy from college and lived in the same dorm floor as me, and I knew he could write code really well. And when I was working here, I'm like, we have a fundamental problem with sales because of how we're dealing with applications versus closed loans, everything else. So we actually built through him, was able to build like a lead sales accountability tool. And
Mm.
then we of course expanded it and now we actually do offer it out. But what we did several years ago, maybe 10 now, we actually shut off all our online loan applications except for mortgages and then killed it because we're trying to figure out, unless we're a full digital financial institution, we're trying to figure out how do we add our personality and our human touch to be able to go deeper with the individual
Mm-hmm.
and offer more products, right? I mean, that only makes sense. But what I hope for in the future, or where I think the future is next, this thing I've been wrestling with personally is if we like the identity, and I always think of any business, especially our credit union, as a person. I always personify it. I'm like, okay, if Community Choice is a person, what would they look like? What would they act like? What kind of music would they listen to? Where would you find them on a weekend? They have friends. What do they do with their friends, family, all that stuff. So I've been trying to figure out if we like this, the board likes it, the staff likes it, our members like this different attitude and a different way of approaching the financial services. How do we figure out a way to document it down succinctly so that it is always this person we want it to be well into the future. And of course, make sure we're strong on financials, but how do we make it always this thing in the future we want it to be? And how do we make sure that we are one of the 350 remaining relevant credit unions into the future that haven't changed our name because we were merged in?
Mm.
And I think that's a leader thing. You want to talk about, sorry, I know I'm going off on a tangent. Why credit unions, even community banks, I think they're so difficult to sell to is because they're so slow to embrace or make change. And granted, that's a different topic where I think you have a lot of leaders that are writing high capital ratios right into retirement.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's this, they're slow to embrace change. And I think that's fundamentally wrong because I think as a leader of any organization, your number one primary responsibility should be how do you assure the relevancy of the organization well beyond your tenure?
Yeah.
And if you think the way you've been doing business and the way you've branded, marketed, product developed, implemented technology can be the same as it has been, you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You're wrong. So I
Yeah.
don't know if I answered it very well, but I could have went on a bigger tangent to be honest with you.
It's the human experience, right?
Right.
And I have a hypothesis. There was a book written back in 2012. By the way, that was the year that the world's supposed
Everything's 2012, I think.
It is. And that was the year that the world was supposed to end, December 21st, 2012, according to the Mayan calendar. Maybe it did, and we're just in an alternative dimension of reality right now. Who knows? That's a conversation for another day. But there was a book that came out called Pendulum back then. And it was also in 1997, a book came out called The Fourth Turning. And it's the idea that the world just moves in cycles and seasons. And if we look at the pendulum swinging, it's almost like COVID took everything like 100% digital. I mean, that was the year that Banking on Digital Growth released. And it's interesting when financial brand readers lead banking on digital growth, particularly if they're on the retail side, they approach it with this negative aspect. And I get it. It's a preconceived bias. They're thinking, oh, this guy is 100% digital. I'm like, no, digital is just part of the overall experience. In fact, it might outweigh the physical human experience in regards to frequency, but that makes us need to double down on the physical in-person experience when we do get people in the physical world to really leave a positive emotional deposit with them that they take forward over the next 2-3 months or however long it is until they come back and see us in the real world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I also think on that digital journey for a lot of places is, yeah, I think it's really important for them to, again, identify who they are as an organization, not
Mm,
what they are, but who they are.
correct.
And they've got to figure out as they're bringing on this technology, how do they make sure that who they are continues to come through
Yes.
along that digital journey, right? Otherwise, if you go pull it up, we could both do it. We can go grab the app store and find some of the top banking app mobile banking providers.
Yep.
And I've done this before, and I use it in a slide deck and click through them, and they all look the damn same, and they sound the same, and they say the same words. If you forget your password, it's the same stereo instructions reset. And
Hmm.
I think to myself, I'm like, if they all look and act the same in their digital channel, why don't they just all become the same? And then they gain economy of scale,
Well,
right? So if you're going to have a personality, make sure it comes through in that. The ability for your technology to connect and talk to itself and be secure, I would argue it's just important that when you forget your password, that the response comes in the flavor of who your organization is. Like for us, it should ideally be something like, "Dang it, you forgot your password. Happens to us too. We got your back." Right?
people
But
talk
through
that
every
way.
facet,
People talk,
but
yeah.
because they don't. They're too busy talking about, does it connect to the core and does it work with this vendor and everything else. It's like, okay, does it allow you to be you and only
Yes.
enhance the experience that you're creating?
Well, it's this idea. Once again, I've got these hypotheses now as we're entering into the age of AI that, if AI, ChatGPT, is commoditizing knowledge based upon what has been written, published, spoken, etc., the only thing that is left is really the intellectual property that each one of us carries around in our mind, and that is based upon our own experiences. And
Right.
what we're doing now is we're having a shared experience, so we're creating new IP essentially that'll eventually go into the ether, and then chat gpt or AI will pick it up, and but it will never until there's a chip. Once again, another
Right.
conversation for another day. It's the uniqueness that each one of us has as individuals that come together as a team, that come together, teams come together as the organization, that can then inspire something bigger than what we are as individuals here in the present. But we have to continuously come back to, this is a people thing.
100%. It absolutely is. And I think that's, again, when you think about macro microeconomics, the one that's usually not thought of at credit unions, banks, is the most important one of economics, which is behavioral economics. And people don't make rational decisions. They generally don't make decisions the way whatever they tell you is not generally how they're going to make a decision.
Correct.
And when you think about being in any kind of a sales environment, what do people buy? They buy feelings and
Mm,
status.
yep.
I mean, beyond having to buy bread and eggs and everything else, right? So if they do buy feelings, how are you creating an experience to buy feelings? And now, granted, there's a niche for everything, right? So somebody that's really a Chime customer is a Chime customer,
Hmm.
right? You're not going to drag all those people, but to be able to compete, and especially all community banks and credit unions aren't going to be able to compete with the Chases and the Wells Fargo and the B of A's and their technology. So how do you compete? What
Well,
you're left with is experience.
well, let's wrap up with that. I always like to send people off who are watching or listening with something practical that they can apply, something small, thinking about behavioral economics, one small commitment that they can make going forward. What would be the next recommendation, the next small thing that they could do to apply some of the thinking that we've talked about here today so they can make
Yeah.
progress?
Honestly, I think I would take the exercise of sitting down and of course, again, I like to personify it and get feedback from across the whole organization, right? Like, who are we? If we were a person, what would we sound like? What would we act like? What kind of movies would we watch? What kind of music would we listen to? And how, when you define that person, how would they interact with other people? Because
Mm,
once you figure that out, that's how you should be establishing your interactions with your members, your customers, how you should establish your interactions with your teammates. But first, you got to really define who you are and quit saying who you are as a credit union, because that's what you are. It's
Yes.
not who you are.
Yeah. It's a really good way to wrap up today, Josh. This has been such a good conversation. I appreciate your perspective. I wish you the best as you keep doing new things, seeing things differently, thinking differently, feeling differently, acting differently. What's the best way for someone who is watching or listening to reach out, connect with you, say hello if they want to?
Oh, it's easy. LinkedIn's probably as easy. I try to respond to everything, but you can find me there for sure.
Connect with Josh, learn with Josh, grow with Josh. Josh, thanks again, buddy, for joining me for another episode of the Banking on Digital Growth podcast.
Thank you.
As always, and until next time, be well, do good, be the light.